Hello everybody, and today we are starting with the security section of security services and resources available with AWS. So in this security section we are going to talk here about the CloudTrail related to some of the solution architecture, KMS, Parameter Store, Secrets Manager, RDS Security, SSL Encryption, SNI, AWS Certificate Manager, CloudHSM, Solution Architecture for the SSL and SSL on ELB, S3 Security, S3 Access Points, Network Security, some of the like DDos related things, SILTs, AWS SILTs, WAF, blocking an IP address, Amazon Inspector, AWS Config, AWS Managed Logs, and Amazon Guard Duty. So here in this security section, we will be starting with AWS CloudTrail. Okay, so now let's talk about the AWS CloudTrail. So CloudTrail is a way to get governance compliance and audit for your AWS accounts. And CloudTrail is enabled by default on every AWS account. So this will allow you to get a history of all the events and API calls made within your AWS accounts by the console, by the SDK and CLI, other services on AWS, and all these logs will be appearing in CloudTrail. And what you can do is that you can also put these logs from CloudTrail into CloudWatch logs or Amazon S3, and you can create the trail to be applied to all regions or a single region. So if you want to accumulate all these history of events accumulated across all the regions into one specific bucket, for example like S3 bucket, and when we use CloudTrail, for example, well, say someone went ahead and deleted something in AWS account, for example, say that an EC2 instance was being terminated and you want to figure out who did it. So well, the answer is to look into the CloudTrail, because CloudTrail, we have that API call in the CloudTrail, and we'll be get to the bottom of it and understand who did it and when. So to summarize, CloudTrail is in the middle, and the actions of the SDK and the CLI, the console, or even IAM users and IAM roles or other services will be in the CloudTrail console. So we can look into it and inspect it, audit it, what happened. And if you want to have all the events for more than 90 days, then we can send them into CloudWatch logs, or we can send them into an S3 bucket. So here we will be going a little more deeper for the CloudTrail. So we have three kinds of events in the CloudTrail. So that you can. So the first one is called the management events, and these represents operations that are performed on resources in your AWS accounts. For example, whenever someone configures security for the AWS account, they will use the API code called IAM attach role policy, and this will appear in the CloudTrail. So if you create a subnets, this will appear as well. If you are setting up or logging, setup logging, this will also appear by default. So anything that modifies your resources or your AWS accounts will appear in the CloudTrail, and by default trails are configured to log only the management events no matter what. So you can separate two kinds of management events. You have the read events that don't modify resources. For example, someone is listed all the users in IAM, or listing all the institute instances in EC2, these kind of thing. You can separate them from the write events that modify resources. For example, someone deletes or tries to delete a DynamoDB table, and obviously the write events have the probability a lot more importance than the read events, because they can rack and damage into your AWS infrastructure, where the read events is just to get information which are silver important but maybe less destructive. So then you have data event. So they are separate, and by default data events are not logged because they are high volume operations. So what are the data events? So well, you have an Amazon S3 object level activity, for example, get object, delete object, put object, and as you can see, this can be happening a lot on an S3 bucket. So this is why they are not logged by default, and you have the option to separate again read and write events. So a read event would be a get object, where the write events would be a delete object, put object. Another kind of event you can have in a CloudTrail are AWS Lambda functions executions, activities. So whenever someone uses the invoke API, so you can get insights about how many times the Lambda functions are being invoked. And again, this could be really high volumes if your Lambda functions are executed a lot. And a third kind of CloudTrail is called the CloudTrail Insights. So CloudTrail Insight events. So I will talk about a little more about CloudTrail like Insight again into the next slide. So this is the next slide. So now let's talk about the CloudTrail Insights. So when we have so many management events across all types of services and so many apps, APIs happening very, very quickly in your accounts, it can be quite difficult to understand what looks odd and what looks unusual and what doesn't. So this is where CloudTrail Insight come in. So with CloudTrail Insight, and you have to enable it, and you have to pay for it also. It's a paid, only paid, no free trial. So it will analyze your events and try to detect unusual activity in your accounts. For example, inaccurate resource provisioning, hitting service limits, a burst of AWS IAM actions, gaps in periodic maintenance activity. So the way it works is that the CloudTrail will analyze what's normal management activities look like to create a baseline, and then it will continuously analyze anything that is a right type of events. So whenever something is changed or try to be changed to detect unusual patterns, so very simply the management events are going to be continuously analyzed by CloudTrail Insights, which will generate insight events in case something is detected. And so these anomalies, these insight events will appear in the CloudTrail console. So they will be also sent to Amazon S3 if you want to, and an event-based events. So in CloudWatch event is going to be generated in case you need to automate on top of these CloudTrail Insights, for example, to send an email. So this is the idea behind the CloudTrail Insights. Finally, let's talk about the CloudTrail event retentions. So events by default are stored for 90 days in the CloudTrail, and then afterwards they are deleted. But sometimes you may want to have events for longer in case you want to go back to something that happened maybe a year ago for auditing purposes. So to keep events beyond this period, what you have to do is that you have to log them to S3. So send them to S3, and then you would use Athena to analyze them. So very simply, all your management events, your data events and your insight events are going to go into the CloudTrail for 90 days retention period, and then you would log those into your S3 buckets for long-term retention. And when you are ready to analyze them, you would use the Athena service, which is a serverless service to carry data in S3 to find the events that you are interested in about and learn more about them. So okay, so that's it for the CloudTrail events retention. Okay, so now we will be discussing CloudTrail and some solution architectures that can be interesting with CloudTrail. So the first one is around how to deliver files from CloudTrail to S3 and the cap of the use case that it opens up. So we have CloudTrail, and you can set up a dump of the CloudTrail files into S3 every 5 minutes. And so this encryption, encryption can be enabled, and by default it's going to be SSC S3 encryption, but you can set up manually SSC KMS for your CloudTrail files. You could set up a lifecycle policy on your S3 buckets to deliver files to the Glacier tier in case there are archives and you don't need to have them around for a long time, or you just want to archive them and make sure that if you need to access them, you can wait maybe for like 6 to 12 hours before you analyze those CloudTrail logs. So when a file is delivered into S3, you can leverage S3 events to notify either to SQS an SNS topic or a Lambda function, but you can also have CloudTrail deliver notification directly into SNS, and from SNS you can invoke SQS or Lambda function. So this gives you a bunch of different options you can have for this architecture. As you can see, there's not one way of doing things, but getting into thinking how these things fit together is the key to passing the Solution Architect professional exam. Okay, so on top of it, if you need to think about all the enhancement we can have from S3. So we can enable versioning to prevent accidental deletes. We can have MFA for delete protection. We can have S3 lifecycle policy, as I said, to move it to S3 infrequently accessed or Glacier. So you can have S3 object log to make sure that the S3 objects are never deleted and will never be modified as well. So this could be very, very powerful. So you can enable encryption such as SSE S3 or SSE KMS, and you can even have a feature to perform CloudTrail log file integrity validation that will verify that the files delivered in S3 are exactly as they should be and have not been tampered with and have not been modified. So this is getting interesting almost as because we are having a lot of the option with the CloudTrail and logging them to the S3. Because from the CloudTrail and combining this with S3, all these notifications, we can have a bunch of use cases being opened up. And so this is hopefully opening up some stuff for you and helping you understand what kind of architecture we could be looking and what we will be getting into the exam. Okay, another architecture now here can be a CloudTrail can be multi-account. CloudTrail can be multi-account and multi-region. So say we have two accounts, account A and account B, and we have a security accounts that we want to send the logs to. So we'll have CloudTrail in the first account and the CloudTrail in the second account, and we'll set up an S3 bucket that will be holding the logs of these CloudTrails. And the thing is, CloudTrail needs to be delivering these log files into the S3 bucket of the security account. And so the only way for us to do it, it is to define S3 bucket policy, and that S3 bucket policy should allow CloudTrail to deliver files into S3. And the cool thing we have here is that S3 bucket policy, first of all, is necessary, very simple to maintain for cross-account delivery. The second is that if account A needs to access the logs for the CloudTrail buckets, we can create, for example, a cross-account role and assume the role in the security accounts, or we can edit the bucket policy, and we can edit the bucket policy to allow reads from the account A. So it's really up to you to see kind of the architectures you need, but it's really interesting here to see that there's different options to provide the reads access to S3 based on the use cases. And on top of it, we have demonstrated a good way to have a security account in the middle to keep all these cultural logs into a secure place. And maybe the security account has a much tighter security for user management and so on. And so we have certainty that these logs are safe and secure for a long time. Okay, so yet another solution architecture, say you want to create alerts when a certain API calls are done. So you have CloudTrail and you can stream all these events into CloudWatch logs. And then from the CloudWatch logs, you can open up a bunch of use cases. And one of the things you can do with the CloudWatch logs is to create a metric filter and then a CloudWatch alarm on top of it. And this filter will basically filter for the API call you are looking for. Maybe you are looking for a terminate instance. So you create a metric filter for terminate instance, and then if that filter passes through, then you would have the metric incremented by 1. And maybe your CloudWatch alarm is set up to be triggered whenever the metric filter is equals to 1, in which case the CloudWatch alarm can deliver to an SNS topic, and from that SNS topic you could have a Lambda function, you can have an SQS query, you could have multiple things in the line. But this will be a way to create alerts for API calls. Now these log metric filters can be detecting also a high level of API request happening. It doesn't have to be like the specific API. So you can be counting the occurrence of the specific API, for example, terminate instances, or like count the API calls per user, or detect a high level of denied API calls. So maybe someone is someone is trying to breach into your security. So it's not just like the for one API call, you can be creating a metric filter and CloudWatch alarms for counting them or detecting high level of unusual activity. Okay, so there is another feature of CloudTrail that you may be knowing or you want to know about, that which is the organizational trail. So if you have AWS organizations, For example, you have a management accounts and then you have several or used with a member other members account, then it is possible for you to set up a organizational trail directly in the management accounts, because it's very important for you to remember this trail is created in the management accounts and not in the children accounts, in the member accounts or children accounts or in the member accounts of your organization. So what's happening is that once you create this trail, then any events into the member account will be monitored by this trail directly, which is very easy to understand. So that means that any account in the production organizational unit or the dev organizational unit will be monitored, and from there, while you can send the information from a trail into an S3 bucket, that will be again in your management accounts, and this S3 bucket will contain a certain kind of organization where whereas you see the suffix of the S3 prefix represents the account number that is being monitored by the CloudTrail. Finally, we have CloudTrail, but how can we react to events happening in the CloudTrail and the fastest manner? So overall, CloudTrail make up to 15 minutes to deliver your events. So you need to know that. But anyway, we have the CloudWatch events, and CloudWatch events can be triggered for any API call happening in the CloudTrail. You can set it up, and it's going to be the fastest, most reactive way. So if you do CloudTrail, CloudTrail deliver in the CloudWatch logs, the events are going to be streamed, but there may be some time before they have delivered. And here we can create a metric filter, not only to one event where CloudWatch events does digital fine tuning, but you can also set up a metric filter to analyze occurrences and detect anomalies. And so you are maybe looking for many events at the same time. So this is more powerful. Now we have CloudTrail delivery in S3, and here the events are going to be delivered every 5 minutes, and you can analyze the log integrity. You can deliver cross accounts, long-term storage, and you could look at these logs holistically, maybe using something like Athena and QuickSight. And so CloudTrail delivery in S3 is going to be less reactive but more comprehensive. So the idea is that based on the needs you have, you can have different solutions, either CloudWatch event, CloudWatch logs, or S3, and none of them is bad or is great. It just depends on what you are trying to achieve. All right. So this is for the CloudTrail. I hope that it was really good for you, and I will see you in the next section, next lecture.